April 12th, 1861 saw brother versus brother fight to the death in the bloodiest American war of all time, with the North fighting the South for utter domination of these United States, fighting over issues like lifted trucks, honky-tonks on Friday night, and slavery. On November 28th, 2024, three jackasses from Minnesota bought a game that loosely followed the events of that war, but mostly was just a less fun Call of Duty reskin with Muskets. That's right, today we're looking at the inferior PS2 version of the first-person shooter History Channel Civil War Secret Missions, a game that came out in 2008, and I was the total target audience for. I liked playing shooter games on my Xbox 360 because I was a 10-year-old boy, but I also loved the History Channel. This was from the pre-Pawn Stars dominated version of History Channel that was actually about history and conspiracy theories like ancient aliens. I remember in 2008 watching a documentary about how the world would end in 2012 and little 10-year-old me just accepting that as fact and preparing to die in the 8th grade. It really didn't take long for this game to be moved from the glass case at my local Target to the cheap shelf, a shelf that I would always prowl as a kid because, let's be honest, $20 per game was a lot more achievable for 10-year-old me than the hot ticket $50 games of the era. I always wanted to buy this but never ended up picking it up. I think my problem as a kid is that I knew damn well there was a more solid chance this game would be utter dog shit than most. However, 16 years later, seeing that slightly used copy at the game store for like $5 or $6 was too enticing to pass up, so I bought it and forced Grant of Grant the Hierophant and Aiden of NTMA Productions as well to play with me. Jefferson Davis may have served as the only president of the Confederate States of America, but this game was developed by Cauldron Ltd., a subsidiary of Bohemia Interactive for Activision Value, a wing of Activision that made shovelware basically. The game featured a History Channel logo, with each level opening on a brief clip of the Civil War history documentary from them before cutting to gameplay, though the affiliation seems to primarily be for marketing purposes. This game was a sequel to the 2006 game, The History Channel Civil War: A Nation Divided, which is one hell of a title, and the version I'm playing of this game I am going to assume was built off of that game's PS2 rendition. The game is split into two separate campaigns, not unlike Call of Duty's early entries, which would be split across a couple different factions, with this game following the Confederates first and then going to the Union across 11 missions, each mission being fairly short, with the game completed in around 3 hours. Okay, so rather than giving you the beat by beat, I'll just explain it. Basically, you're given a loadout following a brief readout about the mission. Then you do the scenario, which is usually just you going through a shooting gallery with a quick reloading, but still tedious rifle. Then you finish the mission, and it abruptly ends. The game ends when the Union takes over the towns of Vicksburg, which at the time was a deadly battleground, though today is a prosperous town with a Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Wendy's, a second McDonald's, a Burger King, and a Hot Dog Man restaurant, according to TripAdvisor. The gameplay is more or less just Call of Duty, but not as good. The thing about Call of Duty is that it doesn't really touch anything before World War II, because going back to the 19th century, weapons were pretty tedious. The game strategy is more or less fire, then duck and reload. And while muskets of the early game reload in about 3 seconds as opposed to the 30 seconds it took in real life, it's still tremendously tedious. Imagine in Call of Duty having to reload after every shot. That's pretty much the mechanics at play here. It's just annoying. Eventually, the old rifle is replaced with a more advanced rifle, the Spencer rifle, which could hold 7 shots. These repeaters really speeding up the later game, but even with fairly frequent checkpoints, a death in the early game only meant redoing some pretty tedious fights, though I honestly wouldn't die that much since this game is very easy. Sometimes you'll happen upon a pistol. These suck, forget about them. As in standard shooters of the era, there's a sniper mission in Sabotage at Lynchburg, which was probably my favorite part. You see, most of the game's sniper missions are just slow gameplay compared to the run and gun shooting segments. Why play as a sniper when you can go Rambo, right? Well, in this game, it's already so tedious and slow that I actually kind of enjoyed the sniper missions, since sniping is fun, especially when normal combat is already so ungodly slow that it won't really change the game's pace that much. I will say the environments are pretty boring. Cities look like muddy 1800s cities, and most of the game just takes place in barns or grassy southern fields. I mean, I kind of get what I'm paying for with a game taking place in the American Civil War, but at the same time, I wish there was more cover environments and things to navigate, because most levels just have you wander like 50 feet between battles. Then you head to the next battle point that has 2 pieces of cover as you slowly trade shots with combatants across from you. It just gets a little repetitive and lame. The game has gimmick vehicle missions, as was standard in first-person shooters of the era, and since tanks aren't a thing at this time, we got to ride around slowly, shooting a far-off village on rails. There's a boat mission that's tedious too. I don't know. I actually dig the idea of the boat mission enough, but it just wasn't really fun, kind of like the tank missions or plane missions in Call of Duty. Out the box, the game has very little going on beyond the campaign, with an options menu and a bonus menu, neither of which is a multiplayer mode or anything of the sort to kind of extend the value of the game. I mean, this era usually at least had some couch co-op, if not online, which obviously I bought the PS2 port, but the game is like 3 hours long, very linear, and not much room for replayability through like gun variations. This game is very much just do the campaign and put it back in the case, never to touch it again. This game is just a void. There just isn't anything beyond the story. Not to mention, there isn't really collectibles or anything. It absolutely is what it is, which is a shooter with fine Call of Duty-esque controls that only occasionally acts jank, but is tedious as all hell and is done in about 3 hours. Okay, so I played the last gen port, so I don't know how much I can really criticize the graphics. Though, from what I see, if I played the main version of the game, it would have looked pretty okay. In this version, it looks a little dated for 2008, though I played the slapdash port that came out on consoles that had been abandoned 3 years ago in place of the Xbox 360 and PS3, so I kind of gotta live with what I got. The colors are okay and the character silhouettes are clear. I never had a problem knowing who I needed to shoot, and largely could spot even far off targets in the game field. Just know if you're a dumbass like me that bought the inferior port, your graphics will be a little cheap and swampy. Juja Cockruss composed the game, and it's decent enough. I mean, it certainly gives like dramatic first-person shooter vibes. These tracks could have been put in here or in Call of Duty or Battlefield. It doesn't matter, honestly. It gets the job done, but it certainly doesn't do anything but be moderately dramatic background music. Overall, the game is kind of bad. The problem obviously being that the Civil War isn't a very exciting war to translate into a run and gun shooter like Call of Duty. There was a very small variety of weapons, the fastest of which is still immensely tedious when compared to the shit we could use in Call of Duty Modern Warfare that came out a year earlier, or even World at War, which was dropping around this time. It's also kind of marketed as like a COD for history buffs, and while I think it more or less fulfills that promise, I don't know what kind of market something like this realistically had back in 2008, and I couldn't imagine it being something someone would want to play today. The PS2 port I played especially is rough around the edges and almost feels like something a micro developer would have put out in 2003. It was even dated in '08 despite solid enough controls. It's also just short with no real interesting way to gain more playtime, except I guess turning up the difficulty, but I couldn't really imagine anyone wanting to dive further unless it was 2008. This was the game you picked for the week and you were stuck with it. I don't remember what game or games I landed on back in the day that prevented me from picking this game up in the store, but thank God for that game, because surely I got more enjoyment and playtime out of that than this half-baked and ill-conceived attempt at a Civil War Call of Duty game. This game ended up reviewing kind of poorly, landing at 51% on Metacritic, with most reviewers who covered it giving it a 5, including the official Xbox magazine, IGN, GameZone, and GameSpot.